In war, the first casualty is truth, and those who dare to speak it often pay the price with their lives. In 19 October 2000, in a quiet home in Jaffna, journalist Mylvaganam Nimalarajan was murdered. Not for what he did, but for what he wrote. This is the story of a man who told the truth when lies were law. A man who chose courage over silence. Nimalarajan was always reading, always writing. Even as a boy, he questioned everything. He was born in Jaffna in the heart of Sri Lanka's northern conflict zone. He grew up amid bombings, blockades, and curfews. But he refused to be a victim. He chose to be a witness. His reports brought the war-torn North into the living rooms of the world. He didn't choose sides. He chose the truth.
Nimalarajan Mylvaganam was one of the pioneers in reporting from the war-torn area to the world as a war-affected person.
But in a land where speaking out could get you killed, Nimalarajan didn't back down. During the October 2000 Sri Lankan general election in Jaffna, he published a series of investigative reports that exposed vote rigging and threats against opposition voters. Threats followed, phone calls, warnings, but Nimalarajan kept writing. On the night of 19th October 2000, under the cover of darkness, they came. Armed men, their faces shadowed and their intentions deadly, forced their way into his home. In the chaos, they fired at him at point-blank range, ending his life in an instant. His father, trying desperately to intervene, was attacked and wounded. His mother, crying out in shock and fear, was knocked down by the grenade. In a matter of minutes, the home that had once been a place of safety became a scene of violence, blood, and silence. Nimalarajan's pen had been silenced.
Mr. Nimalarajan, disregarding the danger to his life and acting courageously based on media ethics, brought to light the issues of missing persons and the Semani mass grave in Jaffna. Moreover, exposing that the 2000 elections were not conducted democratically and revealing the electoral malpractices that occurred in them became a danger to his life.
Unfortunately, killing Nimalarajan was closing the eyes and the mouth of a war-affected journalist who was talking to the world and telling what's exactly happening on the ground.
Outrage spread swiftly across the world, crossing borders and languages. From Colombo to London, from human rights forums in Geneva to newsrooms in America, his name was spoken with anger and grief. Journalist unions raised their voices, demanding accountability. Human rights organizations issued urgent statements, condemning the attack as an assault on press freedom itself. The BBC called for a thorough and transparent investigation. But weeks turned into months, and months into years. There were no arrests, no charges, no trial, no answers. Only a deep, unhealed wound and a silence that seemed deliberately imposed to make the world forget.
The first time I went to Jaffna was in December 2000, just after Nimalarajan had been killed, and I was the BBC correspondent in Colombo and newly arrived. And I went there, and I remember there was a press conference given in Palali Air Base by the military, and I asked them, did you check and question the soldiers who were on duty that day, that night, in the 3 checkpoints around Nimalarajan's home? And if not, why not? And they just started attacking me about Northern Ireland, which was completely irrelevant. I had to say, look, I'm not a representative of the British government or their policy on Northern Ireland. Why can't you answer my question? And I remember Vidyatharan from Udayan saying to me, oh, thank you very much. At least we've got the headline for our page tomorrow. And I was like, yeah, but they didn't answer. And he's like, yes, but you asked the question. So it was an environment where it was quite difficult to even talk about what happened. The family came to Colombo. In Moratuwa, they were at some points frightened. They were worried about people ringing them up or coming to the door. And then when they finally got the clearance to go to Canada, the 11 members of his family, they struggled to get the no objection certificate that they needed to leave the country. And we had to pull strings at the level of the Prime Minister's office to allow them to leave the country. And how disgraceful is that? And then they left the country quietly in, one night. Nobody really knew. There was no farewell. There was nothing to mark that. And none of them has ever come back to Sri Lanka since then, which is a stain on Sri Lanka, really, that it's not safe for them to come, that they haven't had justice, that it's been 25 years, that so many other journalists have been killed in the interim, and that I think some journalists have already forgotten Nimalarajan, which is terrible.
They buried a man, but the silence that followed buried justice. Despite multiple leads and widespread suspicion of a paramilitary group, no one was prosecuted. The state failed. Deliberately or indifferently, it failed. His story is one among many. Dozens of journalists have been abducted, tortured, or killed in Sri Lanka. Their cases remain unsolved. Their voices lost. Yet from silence, resistance grows. Today, journalism students in Jaffna read his work. His name is spoken in classrooms and protests alike. Mylvaganam Nimalarajan believed in the power of truth. That words could shine light into the darkest corners. That facts could hold the mighty to account. And that honesty was worth any risk. His murder was not just an act of violence. It was a calculated attempt to erase him, to wipe away his work, his courage, and his defiance. But they failed. Because his voice lives on, carried in the hearts of those who read his words, remembered in the stories he dared to tell, and echoed in every reporter who refuses to be silent, who refuses to be intimidated, and who refuses to let the truth be buried. The BBC in London commemorated Nimalarajan by naming a meeting room after him.